Okay, I think everybody's ready. Okay, hi there everybody. My name is Thomas van Niekerk. I've got the challenge of making monitoring and reporting more interesting than the boring subject it is, or can be. Okay, so let's start off. What's up? And I think that's the first question that most folks had or been asked when they walked into the office after the holidays. What's happening? What's up? What's down? And we're sitting with always wishing to know what is really going on. Because everybody runs to your desk and said, it's slow, it's not working, I'm not getting my payment, I'm not collecting my money, something has gone wrong. And it's basically sitting in one of these things. It's an app, it's a program, it's a process. Could even be profits. You know, your financial manager could be running to you and say, hey, we're losing business and we're losing profits. What's happening? And believe it or not, with monitoring and reporting, you can actually try and get some indication of what's going on. But this is normally what we know. And you stare blank at him and he stares blank at you with a bigger question mark in the face. Why don't you know what's going on? You're the technical expert. You're the person that's supposed to know what's going on. And everybody looks at each other with a blank face. Well, wouldn't you rather want this? To turn back to him and say, Mr. CFO, Mr. CTO, Mr. IT manager, this is our business. This is what it can look like. And what do you want me to investigate? Or what question you want me to answer? And this is a snapshot of what monitoring and reporting can enable you to do. But there's a bad side to it. This is not a switch. There's no magic button anywhere that you just turn it on and it's going to give you this. This is almost like very similar to a development journey. It's going to be trial and error. Some will be pretty, some will not be pretty. So get ready for that. So why monitoring and reporting? Well, the basic reason. We can never improve on anything unless we measure it. And that goes any industry, any process within the business, any department, personal life, what your budget is doing, what your finances are doing. If you don't measure it, you cannot improve it and you can't make it better. And monitoring and reporting is basically stepping into that gap that enables you to actually have insight and have the ability to answer, well, can I improve it? Can we make things better? Now, what is monitoring and reporting? You know, a lot of people have, I would say, preconceived ideas or concepts about monitoring and reporting, and it always kind of goes off into a tangent. Well, in its rare essence, it is literally just techniques that has tools and devices and applications that we monitor systems. We basically poll things. Now, there's two ways in which polling happens. It can either be a device or a process or a task that actually reports back to a dashboard that turns red or green or yellow, or you have to have an agent that says, "Oh, come and tell me what's happening. Talk to me. Tell me your story. You know, don't keep me in the dark," kind of thing. So it's basically us checking up on our kids. What are you actually doing behind closed doors? And it requires regular observation. Monitoring and reporting, when you only check it once a year, not going to be good enough. And it's also a process of routinely gathering information of all aspects. Sometimes those are things that you don't want to know about. But if you don't have the data, you can't model it and you can't gain insight of it. So sometimes you have to collect more and sometimes much more than what you actually really need. But one thing leads to another, leads to another. And when you start, especially with reporting, and you don't have a data field, and you've already collected 6 months of data, it's a tough job to get that data back into it. Because especially if it's a first in, first out, or last in, first out type of logging system, the data is gone. because it's a circular logging system and you can't recover it. And then obviously reporting is a means of enriching the information, trying to basically tell us in visual terms by visualizing our data, so we can actually have pretty pictures, because everybody understands a pretty picture, even if it's all red. We like pretty pictures. We don't like spreadsheets, as Christine pointed out to us. So why Azure Monitoring? Well, it maximizes the availability of your applications and services. It's obviously taking care of your performance, because those are, I think, the two things most businesses complain about is, well, why is my web server not up and running, working? I'm losing money because I can't collect orders. And why is my website so slow? Or why is my database so slow? What is actually happening? And then obviously, Azure Monitoring offers you a comprehensive solution for collecting, analyzing, and acting on that telemetry for cloud and on-premise environments. And I think that is one key component we always have to bear in mind, is that if you're not going to do something with the data, monitoring and reporting can become just a white elephant. Just a dashboard you present every Monday morning. Somebody might look at it. Somebody might read your report. But if there's no action and there's no feedback back into the system, there's no improvement. Things are going to be the same now, next week, next month, next year. Now, one thing that came out with Azure Monitoring is the new baby called continuous monitoring. So it's no longer just enough to poll something once a week or once a day. They want to know things real time, up to the minute, up to the second. Now with continuous monitoring, obviously that becomes a real requirement, and it's basically a thing that came out with the CI/CD from DevOps. Because now, especially with mobile first environments, if there's a bug in a mobile system, the response to the bug, the fix to the bug has to be almost instantaneous. And that's why every time you log onto your app stores, there's an update. And more of those updates are actually starting to filter through to traditional IT environments as well. Now, there's, like all good things, there's some best practices involved. Continuous monitoring, it's like, what should we call it? Having a rush hour traffic to your front door. If you don't have certain rules of the road and how you're going to engage with that continuous monitoring and that flood of data coming in, you're going to be overwhelmed and you're going to shut it down, which is not the objective of monitoring and reporting. You basically want to gain the insights thereof. So the first thing is that you need to enable monitoring on all your apps. Why? Well, first off, you need to get the data so you can create a picture. If you're not monitoring your apps and you use selectively monitoring only certain parts of your piece, you don't know whether your puzzle is complete or has got gaps in. And as we know, with quite a few legacy and bespoke applications in most businesses, it's a web and it's not a website. It's, my classic case of my clients is that we've got this very important app. It's critical to our business. Oh, okay, cool. Where is it? I think it's on a desktop in our engineering's office. Okay, tell me more. Oh, it's running XP. What? It's a business critical app? Really? So you have to obviously look at your relevant components. So yes, there will be some judgment have to be made upon that, whether things are relevant to be monitored. You ideally want to bucket those in resource groups. So if you know an application and you want to monitor or report on a particular application, say for instance your financial applications or your ordering application and stuff, create a bucket for it. Because once you create a bucket, which is a resource group, it invokes certain capabilities within Azure that you can actually add value to it. So when you start troubleshooting particular applications or particular solutions, because it's in the resource group, it's a quick and easy way of doing it. And then obviously you need to ensure the qualities are there. So get to know your application, drill down deep, sometimes even get involved with your developer, if they're still around, obviously, because there could be error codes and error handling that should be available in certain APIs and DLLs and stuff like that. And if your developer hasn't added to it, and it hasn't been able to actually pump certain things to a log file or some means of actually publishing that out, you can't get to it. So then you get stuck with basically, is the service running or is it not running? Then you have to create an added component of saying, well, I have to create a piece of code to send a test transaction through to see if it actually works.
Thomas, I have a question.
Sure.
So you say there, enable monitoring for all apps, but now in a platform scenario, the reason we're using platform as a service is because we expect the provider, the cloud provider, to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting and making sure that that app is available to us. So from an availability and performance perspective, is there not monitoring enabled by default?
There is a subset of monitoring and metrics and logs and stuff immediately available depending on the scale. So if you start off with the base applications and you migrate to platform and solutions as a service or software as a service, as you move up the stack, the base metrics and logs ramps up because a lot of those things gets pre-published. The thing is that you have to hook into those dashboards, you have to hook into those data to basically make it sense for you, because they monitor and they would push up metrics that make sense for them, for monitoring the solution or the platform and stuff like that across multiple vendors, across multiple clients and stuff like that. But for your specific custom application, it's not really going to be customized for you. So you're going to basically get a pre-boxed retail variety of monitoring and reporting. And you have to go in there and tweak it a bit. Okay, any other questions? Okay, now, one key aspect, as I alluded earlier on, with monitoring and reporting is that if you do not invoke certain actions to either alert, like in the previous example, a budget has been blown by a dev machine, or something has stopped working or not responding, email the guy on standby, send him an SMS and give him a phone call, you're not improving the response time. And there's basically the mean time to detect and the mean time to repair, which becomes impacted. So if your objective is, I'm monitoring all my apps, great. I've got all of my reports, great. But I get my reports on a Monday morning or every morning at 6 o'clock. But your app has been down for the last 12 hours and there was no action taken. That is actually shooting the whole value chain up in the air again, and you go back to the drawing board. Okay, fine, let's put in the actions. So as you invoke the monitoring and reporting, always bear in mind what actions do you want to invoke, because as you create these rule sets, when you actually invoke the action rule set, it's a lot easier to do it as you progress than having to retrofit it.
Like a lot of things in Azure, have the stuff pre-built before you start using it. Or, think about it beforehand before you go and start spinning stuff up.
There's literally a saying that goes, if you turn your effort into a 90%, think about it, plan it, go through the iterations in your mind of what could go wrong and how to handle those things. The 10% would be spent on actually creating your environment. But if you flip it around and just go boss and spin up your environments and create all these wonderful things, and then at the end want to try and retrofit things, it's a dark task. It's very quickly, some people actually come back and say, guys, scratch let's start all over. And you could have lost 6 months of work. Because retrofitting things to certain environments and resources and stuff like that is not easy. And then coming back to role-based dashboards and workbooks for reporting. Okay, there are certain things that some people need to see. They have to see it. There's certain things that you don't want to expose to them. Okay, so you've got to bear that in mind. We've had a case at a client where they've published a dashboard. They use Power BI, all wonderful. And when we looked at the Power BI dashboard that they created, all of a sudden it was the manufacturing recipe for their product in full detail for the world to see. Okay, that's massive amount of IP leak right there. So you've got to be cognizant of what are you exposing, how you're naming things, how you're labeling things, because you don't know where that dashboard goes. Because anybody can basically snapshot a dashboard, email it to a buddy, and that's it. Your recipe for your success is just down a toilet and somewhere in India they're spinning something up that's taking you out of business. And then obviously build, measure, learn. I think that's a key to everything, is that if you build something and you measure it, you can learn something out of it. If you just keep on building, 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 you don't know whether it's actually working, you don't know whether it's actually improving. Okay, now this is a high-level view of all the moving pieces in the Azure monitoring. As you can see, the key components there in the middle is the metrics and the logs. And those are pretty much your two data types that's been imported into the Azure monitoring. And those are the things that you're going to report on. If you don't have logs, or there's no logs being generated, you might get away with metrics. But if you have none of those, you're in the dark. The only way you're going to basically gain some insight on your apps and applications, behaviors of your business and websites and stuff like that, you got to go talk to your developer to create an actual either load test mechanism or an actual transactional mechanism. And if that's not possible for you, well, then get 10 guys in the room, hook them up to the website and see if they can work by hammering all at the same time, which is not really a space you want to go into, because you could have 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000 people out on the web trying to order your latest gadget and everything falls flat. So it basically requires you to now rethink when you invoke any kind of development or any kind of rewrite of your existing legacy applications going forward, or even looking at your legacy applications to put into the cloud or on-prem, even going from older versions to newer versions. The moment there's a development touch to it, ask the question, guys, are you coding this application with monitoring and reporting in mind? Not just security, and all the other buzzwords. But because if you don't build in that layer for monitoring and reporting and alerting, when you come to this, it's going to be useless. You're not going to gain any insights. And that application that you've just spent $1 million on, writing from a development house, wherever in the world it is, you have to rewrite when you've missed something as simple as metrics and logs. The monitoring platform, in essence, is really just the metrics of what's happening at the box at a particular point in time. What's the disk I/O doing? What's the CPU doing? What's the RAM doing? What's the I/O card doing? What's the network doing? So it's just going to tell you numbers at a specific point in time. So it's like a snapshot. It's like taking a picture of the application at that instant. This is what's happening on the box.
It's like Task Manager.
Yeah, on steroids.
Yeah.
Okay, because all of this gets logged, so you get historical data. So now if somebody comes back to you tomorrow, but I was on your website at 12 o'clock last night, and I couldn't place my gadget order. Well, you can now go back in your metrics and look at 12 o'clock last night, what was actually happening. Did the process spike, like we've had it in the sample over here, and you can draw down further and figure out what is that spike, what was caused by it, and then go wake up the backup team not to run backups at 12 o'clock.
So how far back can you go?
It depends on your storage. The more storage, you pay for, the longer you can go for.
Can you contribute to the metrics? In other words, are there hooks into these metrics? I mean, I've used metrics, but I've never tried to
Customize.
Yeah, I've never tried to customize it. Are there hooks you can get into to feed these metrics? I mean, I know how to do the logs. That's pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, the logs is standard. So the metrics comes from whatever's available on your API and your DLL layer from your particular application. So if there are metrics that, for instance, make available real-time monitoring on a particular application, then you can do real-time monitoring. If it does,
I was thinking more from an Azure point of view. You know, when you go into the log, that's pretty straightforward. And it's not that I've looked, but I'm just saying, is there a method? Is there an API available for you to plug into the metrics, to push the metrics, not to get stuff out, but to put stuff in?
So have a specific performance metric that you're measuring on something.
Yes, on your own custom side.
Yeah. Maybe calls per second.
Insights feeds into this, and insights
Are there things?
Yeah.
Because when you use insights to put into the logs, and there's equivalent in metrics.
Well, you can set up metrics through App Insights. So you publish in the log the metrics to App Insights. App Insights feeds into this.
But it's reading from the metrics.
Yeah. So I'm not talking about reading from the
pushing
metrics.
data into metrics.
Into metrics.
Yeah. But App Insights, you can literally push stuff into
the metrics database.
And you can publish metrics via App Insights.
Okay.
You can set up your own metrics.
So I guess if you've got the default out of the box metrics, for an app, I don't know what they would be, but
out of the box is the normal things, it's like the CPU and
but you might have something, a metric that you want to measure.
I mean, typical would be a response time metric, which you don't get from the standards. You don't know how long from the initiation of an API to the exit. You don't know what it is unless you're actually pushing something in.
Yeah. You see, if you run basically, for instance, the measuring script, and you would actually send a targeted transaction, and you know what the baseline is of that targeted transaction is, you write that to a log, and then you continuously do the polling to the application and measure that metric. And if that metric has a variance, you can put it into the metric, saying, okay, fine, this should take 1 second. Now all of a sudden it's taking 1.2 seconds.
Yeah.
And all of those metrics will then be captured inside the metric database, but you have to create that custom way of injecting it.
Yeah.
And there is an ingestion service that allows you to pull in more stuff than what is available, out of the box. But it's customization.
Yeah, no, that's not.
So.
No.
Okay, and then obviously we're all familiar with the traditional logs. Sometimes the bane of our existence, but without logs, you can't even give an idea of what went wrong or what happened. Case in point, about a week ago, server all of a sudden went down. Everybody was upset because the server actually crashed on a Friday. This application was down to the Wednesday the next week, and I couldn't figure out what went wrong. And they blamed the regular thing, Windows updates, because that went in the week before. And thanks to logs, when we investigated, we found exactly there was a user that decided that they want to upgrade the application on Friday afternoon during production hours, install a whole bunch of applications, and they crashed one of the HR apps. And the logs could tell us that. Bit of digging, but if it wasn't logged, to this day I wouldn't have known what went wrong. Okay, now what can Azure Monitor collect? Obviously the application monitoring data, the OS monitoring data, the resource monitoring data, and subscription monitoring data. So those are basically all of your data sets that's out of the box. Depending on where you are and what services you activate on the stack, starting up with spinning up VMs, going all the way up to solutions and software as a service, you have all of these ready for you to use. And then obviously we can also do the tenant monitoring, especially where people have multi-host agreements, sharing resources, having multiple clients and stuff like that. You can actually start monitoring across multiple tenants, especially when you start co-hosting on the same kit. Now, application insights that we mentioned earlier is basically where the fun stuff starts. Because now you basically want to know what is really happening at what time, what is the metrics, what does the numbers tell me, and where is the potential bottleneck, where is the potential slowdown, where's a stuck process, where's a locked database, whatever the case might be that could potentially cause either an outage or slowdown. Dashboards, we love to hate them sometimes because very quickly people start look at the red stuff or the yellow stuff or the green stuff, and they're starting to ask, well, why is everything green? I expect something to go wrong. Or they flipped it as well. Why is everything red? Well, it can be because the simple fact is that if you haven't properly tuned your thresholds, everything could be green or everything could be red. So it's a key aspect to watch out for is that, case in point, you have spun up some storage for a database and you've maxed your usage on that LUN, which means if you've got a 1 terabyte LUN, your database is 1 terabyte. If you monitor a LUN for free space, it's always going to be red because there is no free space. So you need to make the value adjustment to say, well, do I really want to monitor the LUN? Because it's not going to grow. My database is fixed size. The space has to be managed in the database. So now I actually need to code the monitoring and reporting on the database as opposed to the LUN. And that makes a difference between whether an alert will be red or green. And you sometimes have to go down to that level to understand and explain to the IT manager or the CFO or the client, depending on who you publish your dashboard for, to say, well, all's good or all's bad, or there's an issue, we're busy investigating. Any questions? Okay, now, nothing is for free.
Dashboards are
Well, the dashboards will be blank until you got the data, and you won't have the data until you pay the price. You pay the piper. That's unfortunately the case in the cloud. So yes, there's basically two models where you have a capacity reservation. You're going to do so much capacity, so many transactions, so many space per day, and then you could potentially, when you commit to these, you can realize these kind of discounts compared to pay as you go. Because some folks says, well, I don't really want to commit yet. I first want to try it out. I don't know whether I'm going to use 100 gig or whether I'm going to use 500 gig. I don't know. So to be an upfront commitment there, and that's a minimum of 31 days that you've got to commit for that, it could be a couple of dollars that you're going to be out of pocket. But you could end up only using 1 gig. So most clients are actually starting with a pay-as-you-go model to try and test it out, see how it goes for a couple of days to try and get real numbers. And I think that is the real thing that is a huge split between what you do on-prem and what you do in the cloud. On cloud is real time, real resources, real costs. Those is a huge leap forward for versus on-prem. On-prem, a lot of cost is zero. Not really, we know it, but in most people's mind, on-prem is zero, it's free, because the IT manager paid for it 5 years ago. We're not paying anything for it anymore because we've paid off the tin. They don't care about the running costs and the storage costs and the engineering costs and the backup costs and all the other costs. In the cloud, you pay from the first second you're in the cloud. Pay as you go. Obviously, there's data ingestion, the traditional egress, ingress type scenario. And there's also the data retention that you've got to bear in mind. Because now it becomes, if you're going to pay for it, you've got to basically make the value assessment. Is it worth keeping? If I want to keep 6 months of data of my metrics and my logs, what would it tell me that a month of data won't tell me? So those are the kind of value statements you've got to see. Do I keep my data for potentially a financial year, being 13 months, not 12, because you've got to have the overlap? Do I need to keep my logs and metrics for potentially federal requirements, which could be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, depending on your industry? Case in point, I was involved in a forensics analysis on a company where they detected fraud 5 years later. And they wanted me to go and tell them what happened 5 years ago. So now if up front the decision was made, we need to keep our data for 10 years, you have nothing to report on, sorry sir. Because most logs on a Windows environment is 300 meg, and it's a circular log. So if you haven't collected your logs, you haven't collected your metrics, there's no way for you to actually do an investigation. And it actually ended up in court. They wanted all this data for a court case. So the idea that we're not litigious and it's only in America that you get sued is no longer the case. In South Africa, there's court cases now for data and data to prove or disprove. Question?
So this is an example of how much you're paid, but in the cupcake scenario, what are we paying for? What resource type, if we have to whittle monitoring down, what is it that we're paying for?
The storage.
The storage?
The actual data of the storage.
Is it a workspace? Is it a blob storage that we're putting down? What is it that, if you go back to your slide of what the Azure Monitor consists of, there's a whole lot of components. Are we paying for all of those components, or primarily
you're paying for, let's go back there. This metrics and logs. Though this is pretty much your cost component.
Okay.
And from a minor correction, so somebody delves a little bit deeper, this stuff, the cost to create this stuff is basically in here. Yeah. So there's no charge for these things that you'll say, well, because I've run these things, there's an extra $1 or $2 or $3 that I've got to pay for it. No.
You pay for egress.
Yeah, but
out of logs.
This is all based on this. No, based on this. So you'll see that the cost of these two is at a premium. If you look at a standard storage, it won't equate. You'll see there's a difference. There's a difference.
But it's because it's not just storage. No. It's not a blob. It's other stuff too.
Other stuff too, yeah.
That allows you to run those services on top of it.
Yeah. And it obviously, and that's why if you look at.
If you look at it in reality, especially the lots and lots of text, so that $2 something a month per gig, it's actually a hell of a lot of text. I know some lots can get really big, but it's not onerous amount of money.
No.
But why wouldn't you dump those logs into like a data lake or something?
Nothing to stop.
But then you don't have the ability to run the analytics and the other services that you have.
Well, if you do that, you'll potentially have to look at either another third-party tool to hook into the data lake and actually extract that out of. So then you're talking about archival or historical data and stuff like that. So you may not have a rich reporting environment that you would have here unless you're willing to spend the money on a third-party tool.
schema on read and
Yeah.
things that you have to build, take into
So
consideration.
that means if you really had such a large quantity of logs, it would be worth you doing that. Because 5 years logs, the text logs, they're actually quite difficult to trawl through when you've got that much. So you're going to need a third-party tool in any case. That's not really going to give you that ability that you're talking about, where you're going to do you're looking for evidence for a court case or something.
Yeah.
Like that. You need far better filters than you've got there.
But I suppose from a monitoring perspective, you want it in that function, in that function feature-rich facility of the log analytics.
You want it in that facility to the immediate past.
Yeah.
So what
30
you
days
do
or
is judge
90
the
days,
immediate past is 30 days or 60 days.
Yeah.
But conceivably, you want to take it out of there at some point in time, because you're going to need a better tool than they've got there for that for the real
forensic stuff. But then I guess what you could do is offboard it from there.
Yeah.
As it's aging. It goes into something else.
Yeah. No, I would also recommend that. And the thing is that what I've seen in most cases is live data, which sits in metrics and monitoring, is rarely more than 13 months. Because the only time that they would actually do is they would use that metrics and data and logs to backtrack, well, what happened this time last year? Black Friday sales. Christmas sales, Easter sales, all those kind of stuff.
But you're not going to want everything.
No.
There's certain metrics that you would want.
Yeah, but I'm saying, when you're looking at an operational site, and you're starting to budget for next year, then you want that information to feed into your budgets.
Yeah. And that's why most companies sticks with paying this premium for 13 months, and I'm quite happy to do that because I can very quickly backtrack what happened last year at this time. Do you need extra VMs? Was the spike sufficient enough? Was the generated sales and profits enough to warrant that we need to ramp up for Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all that kind of stuff? Okay, obviously there's some wonderful things online to check out. If you want to delve deeper into it, there's cool monitoring docs. There's some very nice Azure Monitor overview. Obviously, we're going to load up the presentation to the meetup site. So all of the links are live. You can go and check it out, see what you can collect, what data sources, queries, and what best practice are available out of the box. Because obviously, you can build up your own little sample. And what works well is if you do present to a client, use their data, hook into their tenant if they got one, or create a demo tenant for them and actually use, something as relevant to them. And that goes a lot further, to convince them to really look at monitoring and reporting from the word get-go, and don't leave it as a commodity or a component only to be turned on right at the end. Because when you start activating this rather in the beginning of your journey, very quickly you can highlight issues of over-provisioning, under-provisioning, over-speccing, not catering for certain particular trends, rather than having to waste 3 months of redeveloping something that could have been done from the word get-go.
You can also show the value that whatever it is that you're doing is providing.
Correct.
Showing you cost savings and performance increase, or whatever it is that ultimately you want to align what you're monitoring to whatever the business's strategy is for going to cloud.
Yeah.
What is the objective?
Yes.
So you need to have that upfront conversation and make sure that you are monitoring for those metrics so that you can show that value later on.
Yeah, and I mean, one business case that we had was the fact that the company decided, well, do we spend R1 million on revamping our on-prem kit, or do we kill that initiative and rather look at going to the cloud? Now, we did the cost calculators and all the kind of usual spreadsheet things to decide, well, is it going to be $1 million that you're going to spend with this in the cloud, or are we actually really going to save money, bearing up all the other costs and stuff like that? And one thing that came out was the fact that with monitoring and reporting up front, as we build out the environment, we could actually end up saving them a lot in their VM spin-up costs, because their idea was a one-to-one. If I've got a 4-core or 8-core or 12-core processor on the box on-prem, I need the same in the cloud. And we could actually prove to them that we could get away with sometimes 20, 15% of actual compute on-prem for the equivalent in the cloud, which is a lot cheaper. I mean, in some instances, we save them 80% of their bill just by actually monitoring, and we could actually prove it on a dashboard saying, sir, that box haven't blipped, and we're running full load on it, and we're running literally at 15-20% of your on-prem compute. And it makes a difference between, I think, D1, D3, or D4 type environments that you've got to run, which is heavily priced, as you may have seen. Well, thank you very much. Is there any other questions? Any other online? Joburg? Okay, so either the guys fell asleep or I've answered all the questions.
No, we're good.
Okay, thanks, guys.
I have a quick
So we had
question
echo.
Sorry, Alistair. About querying the logs. So you have all these logs.
Mm-hmm.
How do you query those logs? This is a bit of a loaded question, but it's not a case of just double-clicking on stuff and viewing logs, and the dashboards that you have the ability to create need some kind of code happening in the background to display those metrics in pretty graphs and tables and things.
So you basically go back to your traditional select star from.
Yeah.
You got to look at your whatever's with the database or the metrics will in the logs will say, okay, fine, these fields are captured, these fields are available, and then you basically go into like a report viewer mode, so you can build a custom report and you can select your fields and the values that you want to report on, and then generate your custom report, and then you can actually have those log entries read into it. Mm-hmm. So you can then filter on event IDs and sources and stuff like that, and you can draw down. If you know exactly what you're hunting for, then obviously it makes it easier, because you can then pre-select your filters, what you want to filter on, and the query will then go off, sift through all the logs, pick up that, and then present it back to you.
So what I'm saying is there's a bit of a language that you have to learn, and the language is called Kusto, Kusto Query Language, or KQL, and it, like Thomas said, the select star, which would be a SQL example. Kusto is very similar, but you need to learn that language in order to query the logs. So the log querying links there, I would expect would show you some samples of querying to get a dashboard like that using Kusto querying language.
You can always come to our boardroom. We'll set up a demo, you can look at it.
I think in India, I actually put a link to the Kusto, so it will be there. I'll just make sure it works.
I don't know how because I'm not technical, I don't know how to work, but from an X-content perspective, this is actually what we offer our clients obviously in the managed services that they have a choice of. And we will do the event query logs. We will give them their dashboards on a monthly basis of what is happening in the environment, and a person from that side to also view the dashboard. But it's a service they pay for. We don't give it to them for nothing, kind of thing. So if you want to, if you really want to,
no such thing as a freelance.
Yeah, we can speak to Dan in one of the chats. Can just from a technical perspective, because that is what we do on a monthly basis to our clients. By the 7th, all the reports is out to them, and they have a certain access code to also go and pull it. But I don't know how that's set up, and I don't know what third-party tools, but that is what we sell for our bread and butter.
We'll tell you what your data is telling you for a job.
No, I will not know if you didn't know.
There's some elementary front ends in Azure anyway.
Yeah.
And insights have got some things. It's not as though there's nothing there. And it depends on your volume. I mean, if your volumes are very low, you can probably get away with it. But once you get into the enterprise area, you know, it's not low enough. You know, it gets much bigger.
Yeah.
As soon as you start having multiple VMs and stuff like that, and multiple applications on multiple VMs, then I would suggest you probably need something more than the built-ins.
Yeah, like we have let's call it the X content as well. With the smaller clients, we will push their data into which we pay back to Microsoft, and then we also monitor the client's data in their tenant portal. So we can speak to them, explain to you, but technically I won't be able to tell you in depth.
Yeah.
How he sets it up. But it's all it's about the development and the little apps that we internally develop for these systems to talk to one another. Because customers have their own stuff.
Yeah. One thing I would like to just highlight is the fact that if you've got different environments, do not mix and match your monitoring and reporting across different environments. So try and keep it in a silo. You know, it's a swear word in some circles, but if you have an environment, set up your monitoring and reporting for that environment. Don't create a centralized monitoring and reporting with different environments and stuff like that. It's chaos. And it's not now, in a week's time, 2 weeks' time. It's in a couple of months' time, trying to make sense of what's actually being captured into the logs and the metrics. You can't make a rhyme or reason out of it because it's actually different environments, and you've contaminated. Think of it, you know, walking into a room where they talk 10 different languages, and you're trying to make sense out of and having one conversation. You're not going to be able to. You actually need to keep it with the same conversation. So for monitoring and reporting, try and keep it the same conversation. So if you, for instance, have either one client or one particular environment, set up your monitoring and reporting for that environment. Because your troubleshooting, your analysis, your log querying to try and backtrack and find out especially what went wrong or what went right is so much faster because it won't be contaminated and you don't have to, you know, become very smart with your filtering because you have to unfilter a lot of things because it's going to pick up a lot of stuff which is irrelevant. And that's just going to give you a lot of data clutter in the metrics and the logs. Okay, that's all from me. Thanks very much. If there's no more questions.